Welcome to the podcast of MotorWeek, television's original automotive magazine. MotorWeek is made possible by Auto Value and Bumper to Bumper and TireRack.com. Here's your MotorWeek podcast host, John Davis.
Thank you, Alec Webb, and welcome everyone to MotorWeek podcast number 310. I am indeed John Davis. We have a jam-packed podcast for you today. Greg Carlos is going to take us over the edge and talk about some of his most recent stories, including one that we really have never done before. And we're going to take a look at Honda's GM-built EV. Jessica Ray is going to fill us in on that. And Brian Robinson is going to have the details on Mercedes Level 3 autonomous system Drive Pilot. Plus, we'll do a lightning round about hybrid sales and a viewer question about charging a plug-in hybrid. And more about hybrids coming down the pike. Let's see, Greg, we're going to start with you. You have been a very, very busy man. Take us through some of the most recent segments you've done and talk about this something that we're calling MotorWeek's Overdrive. But take it away.
Yeah, eventually you do have to do some work throughout the year. So if I have to be busy for like 2 months, that's all right.
Oh, gee whiz, you're giving it all away.
Yeah, the first one kind of started back in, May at Mecum, Harrisburg. So
Mecum being one of the really big classic car auctioneers.
Right, one of the premier ones. You spend a weekend, wasting a weekend just kind of watching auction coverage literally all day long. And we have some contacts within Mecum. A former MotorWeek employee actually is with Mecum right now. So we had the opportunity to go behind the scenes and kind of just check out what it's like at like a real big auction, which I think most car fans are probably familiar with smaller local stuff that they go to. And those are exciting enough because like you go in and most times you have a real chance to get a good deal. But this is more of like a spectacle. This is nationally televised. And another thing is Mecum, they produce their own. They do it, they own it, and they produce it. And we know how hard it is to produce a television show. So going up behind the scenes, it was my first time at a big auction like this, getting to meet like Jimmy Landis, which is their lead auctioneer. And that's the person you see all the time who has all those cool sound bites.
Can you understand him, though, when you're talking to him one-to-one?
I mean, you can. Well, no, actually, he does. When you speak to him, you just assume auctioneers just kind of talk like that. Like Boomhauer from King of the Hill all the time. But he was great to talk to, and it was cool. This didn't make it into the piece, but we have all this other footage of the interview of like how he got into it. And he was actually like sort of local to Harrisburg area, which if you're unfamiliar with Harrisburg, Pennsylvania in general is car country.
Yes, it is.
There are so many
Swap
classic
meets, Carlisle
cars.
is famous.
Yeah, we did Carlisle too. Jimmy was great. Chicken George, obviously the guy you see running around yelling, sold, sold, sold. He was a character, man. Like he is not just like somebody who puts on a face for TV and like a whole persona.
That's the way he is.
That's how he is.
Yeah.
Like we had to turn down our mics several times to get the interview audio right. He was great, but and then interviewing the CEO, Dave Majors, just talking about the business side of it and how much it's grown in the around 20 years they've been doing this, at least on air. And I think they're up to like about a dozen, like maybe 15 or so auctions a year. Harrisburg's a fairly big one. Kissimmee in Florida, where their base is a huge one. They also go out to Monterey, where that's the big bucks. That's where they bring in big money.
I was going to say, what was the most expensive vehicle that went for that you saw when you were there?
I was there.
Anything in 6 digits?
I was there on Friday. Yeah, there was a couple of 6 digits.
Yeah.
The only two that stick out was I think a '69 fastback that was pushing 200,000. And oddly enough, a new Raptor R went for like 150-ish.
Huh.
Yeah, which was odd to me. I didn't get a full story on like why that Raptor went off.
Wow. Maybe
just excited. That's part of it is like the excitement. What I learned was like, obviously people are there going to buy a car or to sell a car, but a lot of people are just there to like get caught up in the excitement of such a big auction. And I get how like the bidding war, you can get caught up into it, especially with one that's on live television. You have, one of the best auctioneers in the country. You have so many people there. So like, it kind of does make sense that a Raptor R, which typically doesn't sell for that much money, goes off for that much money because you just get caught up in it. But it's a really crazy atmosphere. The facility is just huge. It is literally nothing but cars, like just seas of cars. And then one of the cooler aspects was we got to go and check in a vehicle. So like there was maybe 1,500 vehicles that were going to roll across the block across the weekend. Everyone comes through this one check-in process, checking VINs, because obviously when you buy a car, it's something this big, you want to make sure all the VINs are matching. It's what you're buying. So that's actually like an overlooked part of the experience is like making sure this car is exactly what they say it is.
The seller claims it is.
And they do that through, they hire like local, or they hire like ex-law enforcement, and they know where VINs are. They know how to like check through all the cars, make sure mileage is right and everything like that. So that was like a kind of like a low-key, cool part of the auction that really gets overlooked. Because
would you say that was your biggest surprise? What sort of jumped out at you that you said, wow, I didn't know that?
How many people were there at all times, I think. That was my biggest surprise. I thought I'd get there. I got there about like 8 o'clock, and it was already packed full.
Really?
And the auction hadn't even started. People were just there milling around. And the entire time I was there, which was probably about 6 hours, the grandstand area and the auction area where people were there buying never got any less crowded. Wow. It was packed to the brim the entire time, and that was Friday. So they welcome in a lot of people over that weekend.
If you have any doubt about whether the car culture is alive and well, I think you just need to go to a big auction.
Seriously, it's an event, man. You should, if you're into cars at all, because you see stuff that like it's not just classic cars. It's a lot of new cars like the Raptor R, and then there was like one setup where they had the DeLorean or a DeLorean dressed up to be like the Back to the Future DeLorean next to Marty's Toyota pickup truck, which was really cool for me.
Were they a duo? Like you?
I don't think they went off together. Yeah. Maybe they did. I didn't. Again, we were doing so much stuff there, but I was just taking pictures and staring at them.
Did anything tempt you?
The Marty's pickup truck. Yeah. Luckily, I have such a small wallet. I couldn't, there's nothing I can do. I can be tempted by a lot of things.
Okay, you just got back from a shoot we've been planning for quite a while, and it comes under the category of something completely different for us here at MotorWeek. Why don't you tell us a little about it? We teased it before. MotorWeek's Overdrive, a new feature. What is it? How did it come about? And what can you tell us about it without giving it away?
That'll be the tricky part, not giving anything away. Maybe we can edit some stuff out if I slip up. But you described it perfectly. It is something we have never done before at MotorWeek. And by never done before, I mean literally have ever done any part of this.
43 seasons, we've never done a segment like this.
I'm talking, we didn't have a script for this segment.
Oh my God. Yeah. Nothing was written down?
I had one stand-up that I wrote down at the beginning, and that was it. Everything else was off the cuff. The idea was that we get to do all this cool stuff all the time. I've had, unlimited thrills here at MotorWeek, but we wanted to kind of share with a viewer the things that we get to do on a weekly basis. So we went out and I talked to some local car clubs and we put out feelers trying to find the right viewer. And that was probably a 2-week process of talking to people, finding the right person. We found an awesome gentleman named Nate who came down and was willing to devote a day to us at Dominion Raceway. And we drove around the track a little bit in a car that the other part of this was that while we want to give this viewer an experience, we also like to kind of highlight that standard cars, like daily drivers, are actually pretty fun, more fun than most people think they are. So we actually got a Camry TRD. A
Toyota Camry TRD.
Yeah.
So nice car.
Right.
Yeah.
And granted, it is a TRD, so it is a little bit beefed up compared to your run-of-the-mill Camry, but it's still a Camry. It's a 4-door Toyota. And Nate had never been on a racetrack, and that's what we wanted. So I took him out. We had the cameras rolling, and I went a lot faster than he's probably ever gone in a Camry.
I think you've told enough. Now, this was our first putting a toe in the water in reality television. That basically, it's you basically have an idea what you want to do going in, and you see what happens.
Yeah, we were feeling our way from a production standpoint. We were feeling our way through it because we've never done it before. It was instead of the old, well, let's set this up. We know what we're saying. We know where this camera's going to be. We had an idea, but we didn't know for sure. Sometimes I would say this, then Nate would say that, then the camera has to be, it's just everything is unscripted, which I think is really cool. We've gone through the footage. We have some really good stuff. And that alone, I think we have a little surprise in there too, which was, it ended up being, I'll say this about it. The surprise went off as good as I could possibly hoped it would.
Now, Jessica was involved as well. Now, the other thing we're doing, which is unusual for us, is that there will actually be two versions of this. There'll be a long version that will be basically premiering on digital first, and you can, Jessica, tell us a little about where that will be and approximately when.
Sure, yeah. So this is the first ever production that we are doing, which is, like John said, it's going to be on digital first. It's a digital first production. So it's going to be on our YouTube channel first.
And this will be a longer version.
Yes, this will be a longer version.
Probably one of the longest segments we've ever done.
Definitely one of the longest segments that we've ever done.
Minus my first drives.
Or minus a full episode of something. But yeah, so it'll be on our YouTube channel, and then probably shortly after that, an abbreviated version will air in the show. I believe episode 11 is when it will be in the show. And then it should be online about a week before.
November, right?
Yeah, before Thanksgiving.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
well before Thanksgiving.
Online should be around the first week in November.
Yeah, around the first week of November. We don't have a set date yet, but
Right.
stay tuned. We will have that soon.
But if you ever thought that watching reality television that not having something scripted made it easy, I think you're absolutely
Come
wrong.
hang out in the editing
Yeah.
suite with us.
I don't want to let you off the hook without talking about something new that you have driven, and you basically we have coming up on the show our quick spin of the Nissan Z Nismo, and you actually got behind the wheel.
Yeah, that's this was all in like what, a 3-week period
Yeah.
that I've
Yeah, it
done.
was.
Like I said, you're a busy guy.
I also ran out to Rennsport reunion too in that
Yep.
time. We'll talk about that another time. Yeah, Nissan Z Nismo kind of got lost in the shuffle of everything happening, but an exciting car that we didn't have to wait too long for when you compare it to the Z, the
actual
base Z.
base
We
car,
waited,
yeah.
we waited
Forever.
for a long time. They invited us out to Sonoma, took it out to the racetrack because this is a Nismo. They wanted to show off. There was, when we got the Z into test, we wanted to take it to a track, and it ended up not working out. But probably for the best because Nismo is the one we want to take to the track. Still uses the same twin turbo V6. They pump up horsepower, 420 horsepower compared to 400. A little more torque at 384 pound-feet. Basically, they achieved that through just like cooling. They increased the turbo speed, so more boost. So it's not like a completely new engine or anything. They just kind of tuned it. They also tuned the suspension, stiffer spring rates. Bigger brakes. To me, the transmission, so there is no manual transmission, which people I know are already probably groaning about. And I certainly agree. We saw it with the Supra. I felt like the manual transmission in the Supra really turned that car into an even better car. But I wasn't too unhappy, or I wasn't too put off by it at the racetrack here with the Nismo Z. The transmission, I'm sorry, back to that. So automatic, 8-speed, they tweaked it so that it's actually a very accommodating automatic transmission, and it's very predictive. So I drove it on the street for a while before we got to the track, and they have a Sport Plus mode, which in every car, every performance-oriented car, when they have a Sport Plus mode, that's generally the highest one, and it's kind of like undrivable on the street because it's always holding gears. It's way too rough. That really wasn't the case because the transmission was so good at understanding what I was doing. Was I accelerating hard? Was I braking hard? Was I making a lot of turns? And if I was just cruising in Sport Plus, I'd be up in 8th gear. It'd be fine. So when you get on the racetrack, though, I was concerned. Okay, well maybe it wouldn't be aggressive enough. But on there, it was actually understanding how I was driving, and I never even had to use the paddle shifters, which is pretty cool. We also got the chance to drive a Nissan Z Performance right before we got the Nismo, which is great because we got to see the differences back to back. And it is a significant difference, just those spring rates alone. And then you throw in tires and everything else. It's a completely different car on the track.
Brian Robinson. Brian is the guru of all things detailed about in writing all the road tests that he churns out here at MotorWeek. When you hear the word Nismo with Nissan, I mean, what are your expectations? Are you expecting a big upgrade, more of a tweaking, like the word that Greg used?
No, it's come to be more of a tweaking, but Nissan Motorsports, that's what it stands for. And it's just a minor upgrade.
But still drivable.
Yeah, sure. It's not a full-on track car.
Yeah, agreed. It is a better track car than the base Z, but it is, I think they just tweak in the right areas. It's not like a full overhaul of the car. I will say, so pricing, the Nismo Z, or as they call it, they're very specific, the Nissan Z Nismo. That's how they refer to it. $66,000 after destination. So hefty prices, especially when you consider it's like $22,000 more than the base Z. And honestly, I will say, like, I thought it was a fun car to drive. I think now, like, the Nismo brings it to where the Supra already is, without like any more performance added to it, because it has more horsepower than the Supra by like 40 or so horsepower. But as like a driver's car, it just felt like they were finally comparable.
I can't wait to get it myself. Now for something at the other end of the spectrum almost. I'm going to turn to Jessica. Now, some years ago, I think it's about 3 years ago, we all got raised eyebrows, in a good way, I think, when we heard that Honda, who generally was considered behind the mainstream when it came to producing full EVs, was going to work with General Motors in developing a pure EV using the GM Ultium platform that they've spent so much time on. And I mean, it makes perfect sense because it saves Honda billions of dollars of development. Well, the first vehicle is out now. It's called the Honda Prologue. It's an SUV, of course. So, Jessica, you've had a chance to dive into it. Is it a Honda? Is it a GM? Is it something totally different? What do you think?
That's a hard question. I mean, I think it's mostly still a Honda. I mean, I will say its design language, its design language is still very close to the Honda.
Certainly looks like a Honda.
Yeah, to me, like, I almost think that its kind of shape is a little comparable to what we see in that new HRV, to me, personally. Like, it's very rounded. There's like no really like sharp edges on it. I would kind of call it like cute to me personally. It has like new lettering on it too, which is interesting. I don't know if you saw the Honda. There's a Honda across the back, and it's in a font that I don't think I've ever seen before.
Portrayal of luxury, apparently. 'Cause
Right,
I remember Lexus a few years ago, they were talking about it for the new NX. They're like, this is now that when you spell things out and spread the letters, that's luxury.
Yeah.
So everybody's doing it now.
So-
and I don't think Honda's ever spelled out their name on a car. They've always used the badge.
It's bigger than the CRV.
Yeah, about 8 inches.
But it's still just a 2-row SUV?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. And I mean, that's sort of, we're getting into like a weird time with new electric vehicles that they don't fit quite into the segments as gas powered and hybrids do.
Or if that's just to make space for the batteries.
I mean,
or
that's a
whatever.
big part of it.
Yeah.
This isn't a small battery. There's an 85 kilowatt hour battery in here. So it's not a huge battery, but it's not a small battery. It's pretty significant. So there's going to be 2 different powertrain setups. There's going to be a single rear-mounted motor single front-mounted motor for front-wheel drive, or a dual all-wheel drive setup with 2 motors. Now, we know horsepower on the all-wheel drive, that'll be 288 horsepower with 333 pound-feet of torque, which is, I think, pretty respectable. And honestly, like, I don't hate those numbers because a lot of times when you go to the all-wheel drive setup, it's like 400 horsepower.
And it's almost undrivable.
You don't need it,
Yeah.
right? Like, so we don't have numbers yet for that single single motor powertrain. But I would expect that to be somewhere a little over like 200, somewhere around there, 200 horsepower. They do say that they're eyeing up to 300 miles of electric range.
With the two-wheel drive, probably.
With the two-wheel drive version, yes. Which, when you take into account them using the Ultium platform, that does seem achievable. But we also have not seen even GM's smaller crossovers,
No.
and they haven't even been EPA tested yet, right? And
No, we've seen them, but we haven't actually seen them. If you know what I mean.
Well, it's kind of interesting
because
like John and I were talking a couple days ago. The Blazer EV is now hitting dealerships, so that's kind of the first comparable vehicle
we
built
thought it
on
would
this
be
platform.
the Equinox. At least I did. I thought they would get that one out first.
The Blazer was first, and then we're going to do Equinox a couple months
Yeah, but
afterward.
Equinox was going to be their big foray into EV
Yes,
fleets besides
yes.
the Bolt. Well, okay, so for people that aren't familiar with what the Ultium platform is, this is a modular, as they say, all EV platform that GM is using or going to use eventually for all of their EVs, as far as we know. That's one of the reasons they were talking about doing away with the original Bolt, is it's not built on this.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea is you can stack the battery cells, you can spread them out, width and length, so you've got a lot of flexibility. And they've spent years and just mucho bucks developing it. So I was actually very glad to see Honda, as an engineering company, because that's what they're known for, go to what looked like one of the most interestingly engineered EV platforms. So I actually think it's a big deal. But I understand inside there are some departures, some things that maybe say scream GM and not Honda.
Well, I mean, the infotainment and the screen that they have, it's like an 11.3 inch infotainment screen, and it's pretty much very similar to what you're going to get in, like what we've seen recently in like the Colorado and the Canyon. It's that same size and the same software. They're using that same software. I mean, it's built in a GM factory, so it's not like they're going to take Honda stuff for that specifically. But so, like we've seen that design language from the Civic, and that kind of we've also seen in the CR-V, and all of that has translated into many Honda models. You're not going to get a carbon copy of that, but it's not a huge departure.
I thought it looked very family oriented. Brian, any comment?
Very surprised to hear that Honda was working with GM on this. Honda's usually the forefront, of everything technology-wise. To turn to someone else to do their EVs, very surprising. But I guess Isuzu wasn't available, so they turned to GM.
You're right. Certainly not the first time they've done this.
I don't know. The Ultium platform is great, but I mean, even they're having problems getting their own products out there, getting the batteries up and running. So it's just going to slow that process down even further. So
yeah, that's a very good point. We hear and see a lot of EVs, and like next year there was just an article I read, 50 new EVs, not all of them brand new, but second generation models included, 50 new EVs next year. But when you look at the production numbers, often it's a couple of
5,000.
5,000 a lot, or they're trickling out at a couple of thousand a month. So this is a long way from being, you've got a flood of models, but not necessarily a flood of vehicles. And basically you still have Tesla taking 70 or plus % of the market.
Well, we should mention the price. We don't have an exact MSRP quite yet.
Of the Prologue.
Yeah, for the Prologue. But Honda says that it will be priced in the upper 40s. So I would guess probably somewhere like 48,000.
So a little bit
Just under
above
50.
Is that like the upper trim, or would that
No,
be,
that's
do we
like
have any
that's a
idea?
starting price.
Upper 40s?
That's, that sounds a little uncompetitive with the VW ID3.
ID4.
ID4 rather, sorry.
Yeah. I mean, it's cheaper than some models, but it's still
Well, Hondas generally get premium price. And Prologue, the name, you sort of think, okay, so that means what comes next? Maybe it'll be their own. We'll see. Okay, we are going to be talking about one other feature, and this is Brian Robinson's chance to shine a little bit later in the show.
My favorite feature.
The Mercedes Level 3 Drive Pilot. It's arguably the most sophisticated autonomous driving system that we have experienced so far. And he'll have a little bit more about that coming up. I do want to take a pause to mention our advertisers. Again, thanks very much, Auto Value and Bumper to Bumper, great chains. And the folks over at TireRack.com who've been with MotorWeek as sponsors for quite a long time. We have a lightning round, and let's dive into this. And generally speaking, we used to try and hold everybody to about 30 seconds to talk about this automotive topic, something trending, but we don't do that anymore. So it's like we just let it. As long as you want to go on.
It's just because I don't have the bell.
Yeah, we did away with the bell. According to Bloomberg, and I have to admit, I'm a little surprised at this. According to Bloomberg, the higher cost of electric vehicles, with the average EV selling price about $53,000, and actually I think that's low.
Is that actual transaction price?
Yeah, I don't know. I thought it was well into the 60s, but okay, they've done the research. With the average EV selling for about $53,000, and the lack of convenient and reliable public charging infrastructure has led buyers to hybrids again. Now, hybrid sales, and we're talking about both regular hybrids and plug-in hybrids here. Hybrid sales have doubled since 2020, according to Bloomberg. Do you think brands who have skipped hybrids and went straight to EVs should reconsider Detroit-based brands for the most part? So what do you think about that? Who wants to start?
Well, it's tough to think from their point of view for the brands that have skipped, quote unquote.
They did it because of complexity or they wanted to avoid it.
Yeah. I mean, personally, it's I think hybrids help more people in the environment now, hybrids and PHEVs. But
Toyota actually did a study, and they said four plug-in hybrids do more for the environment than one pure EV.
Right. But if you do try to put yourself at the head of, say, GM, it's like, okay, do we backtrack now? How does that look? We just spent all this money and all this. We marketed ourselves as we're going to be electrified by this point. I mean, how do you go back and say, well, we're going to go back to hybrids? It's like, then you kind of accept that you were wrong in the first place, right? So should they? Probably. Because again, with what we just said about hybrids, we always thought there needed to be a stepping stone, PHEVs, plug-in hybrids being one of those, a big one. So yeah, should, yes. Will, probably not.
Brian Robinson.
Yeah, I don't know. It's tough because we are eventually all going to be at EVs, theoretically.
At least the government policy stays
theoretically. So I think the hybrid sales are more of maybe on the other end of the spectrum, car companies making them available with just about every vehicle, certain automakers where you don't have a choice sometimes.
Like
you have
Toyota.
to get a hybrid.
Yeah.
Correct. So I think that has more to do with it than people
Interesting.
not being. I question some of the numbers in this thing as well. But yeah, I don't know if they should go back or not. I would say they dumped all this money into the EVs. They should probably go forward with it, but they need to get them out there and start delivering them.
Jessica.
Yeah, I mean, I think hindsight is always 20/20, right? But I feel like I anticipated something like this happening, right? That we couldn't, a majority of people couldn't either afford or weren't in a situation where an EV was a viable option for them and still isn't at this time. And so what's the next best thing? Something that's electrified. And as a person who's buying a hybrid, hopefully this calendar year, I fit right into, that demographic of people who want a hybrid and can't really use an electric vehicle the way it should be at this moment. So it would be nice, especially when you look at something because you spoke of Detroit, but look at something like the Volt,
right,
which was such a beloved vehicle by the people who owned it.
Just I mean, you had almost 65 miles worth of EV range, and you still had a gas engine to keep you going.
And there were people who owned Volts. I mean, they would fuel up maybe once a month,
right?
Maybe. Because 65 miles for most people could be
almost
days,
a week's
of
worth
driving, right?
of commuting, or at least several days.
So I think it's like you see a product like that, and you're like disappointed that the buck stopped there, and then it was just full EV. So, I mean, like Greg said, probably not going back. Certain brands certainly not going back, but it would be nice if some of them maybe like thought about adapting a little bit with battery technology.
I mean, it depends on what their strategy. Are they thinking, and are they so committed to EVs, which I think we all agree will eventually be the main propulsion system for cars? How long are they expecting that to take? Are they willing to take it on the chin now? Like, look, we'll let the brands like Toyota, who are selling hybrid, they can sell now. We'll give up those sales.
Right.
Because in in 10 years, we're going to be ahead of them, and then we'll make it all back. That's what I'm saying.
2030.
It depends how long their investment is.
Government policy forced the automakers to make this decision. I mean, first it was California, but now it's the federal government. With the time schedule they've laid out for EV adoption, and of course they've done it by saying you can't, they've done it through emission standards. There's not going to be room for a lot of PHEVs in 6-7 years. So Toyota is a very unusual case, and they're such a global automaker. They're looking at the global markets, and a lot of them don't have the restrictions that say the Europeans and actually the Chinese with them, and we do. And if we get a major change in government policy, I suppose it's possible some of them might go back and dip their toes in the water. But I have to tell you, my personal opinion is hybrids with a larger battery like the Volt had, so you can do like 50, 60, 70 miles worth of range, maybe even 100. I know it's probably has some technical problems with having that big a battery and 2 powertrains. Right. But that seems to me the perfect vehicle. We're a big country, and while most people use their vehicles for short distances, there's something in the back of an American's mind that says, I want to be able to drive it out of state without any problems and go 400, 500, 600 miles at a clip and fill up quickly. And EVs right now, and probably for the foreseeable future, aren't doing it. But it looks like we're on this path, and it doesn't look like, barring some major political change, it's going to change. I just wonder if the consumer is going to wake up one day about 4 or 5 years from now and say, why can't I buy the vehicle I want to buy?
I think that's happened. I think we're starting to see that already, though, but not specifically for electric vehicles, but with just new vehicles in general. I think I read something recently that was like 80% of Americans can't afford to buy a new car, something like that.
And it's going to get worse.
So I think we're coming into a car crisis. I think soon.
We're going to have the people that can't afford to buy gasoline-powered cars probably subsidizing EVs at this rate. Yeah. Anyway, all right. Well, who knows? And we'll certainly have a front row seat to see what happens. Our viewer question from Pat actually is right up the alley of this. He says, if you don't want to invest in having a home charging station, can a plug-in hybrid be used as just a traditional hybrid? ? Pat, I would point out that every plug-in hybrid I know can be charged up at home with just normal household current.
Absolutely.
So you don't really have to invest in anything to charge up a plug-in hybrid, except a good drop cord. But anyone have another answer for Pat? If you don't want to invest in any charging infrastructure for your house, can a plug-in hybrid be used just as a traditional hybrid?
Yeah, absolutely. That's what they are. It is the traditional hybrid with just a bigger battery. The downside is, though, they are less efficient than a regular hybrid, just because you've got a couple hundred more pounds of battery weight and some additional hardware. So if you were to compare like the Kia Sportage hybrid and Kia Sportage plug-in hybrid, drive them both without plugging in, the regular hybrid would be more efficient than the plug-in hybrid. If you're getting a plug-in hybrid, you need to make sure you can benefit from the EV driving time to make it worth your while.
And if you plug in overnight, it's going to be charged the next morning, even at household current, probably.
Yeah, and I mean, and while not all plug-in hybrids are made the same, similar fashion, right? Some are more efficient than others. Like if you get into a Prius Prime, very efficient, even when you're not using electric power. But say something like a Jeep Wrangler 4xe, not exact. You're not going to be getting like 30 miles per gallon if you never plug it in. But the good thing is, most plug-in hybrids, even if they're not quite that efficient when you don't plug them in, they are almost always more efficient than not having any electrification. So like the Chrysler Pacifica, I think is similar in that vein. Like if you got the plug-in,
because
it's better than the gas.
The
even
engine
if you don't
is
plug
generating
it in.
some electric power.
So it is helping a little bit with efficiency. So yeah, it can be used as just a traditional hybrid.
Any comment, Greg?
You guys answered it. Yeah, I would say and actually, I would encourage people to not pay the couple $1,000 to get the level 2 charger installed when you can do it on 110.
Because you're only trying to charge up for 35 or so miles, which overnight is easy to do with just 120.
Case in point, our Outlander. I plug it in my 110, and it goes from 0 to 1, usually around 100, but at least well over 30 miles, and I'm ready to start the day.
Yeah. Good answer. Good topic all the way around on all this EV and hybrid stuff. It's got everybody confused, including us. Before we get to our final topic, once again, thank you, Auto Value and Bumper to Bumper, and also the folks at TireRack.com. We've teased it a couple times during this podcast. Mercedes' new Level 3 Drive Pilot. Brian Robinson, what is it? How did it evolve? What can you tell us about it? Is it really autonomous driving?
In certain cases, yes. I mean, the only thing I love more than driving a car is being in a car while I'm not driving a car. But,
you love that more?
So just to walk you up, like level 1, you think of adaptive cruise control, basically the car keeping its place with speed related to the car in front of it. Level 2 gets more into the lane keep assist, keeping you in the lane. Level 3 puts it all together, and it's really some more government allowances thrown in there to where the vehicle will do all stopping, accelerating, steering on its own at speeds up to 40 miles an hour in certain locations, provided that all of the necessary circumstances have been met, mainly good weather, clean lines, and a road that's on their 3D mapping system, which it has to be 3D mapping just because there are times when you're underneath of another road. GPS will tell you where you're at, but you need 3D mapping to let you know like which level of that road you're on. And
something I hadn't thought about.
Yeah, I didn't think about it either. But I spent pretty much a whole day driving around some driving and some not driving in LA traffic with an awesome German engineer. Hannes, we had a good time.
Big football fan, right?
Yeah. So essentially, it's made. It sounds ridiculous. Car driving itself, whatever. It's really made to be in stop and go traffic when you're in an extended period of time, traveling below 40 miles an hour, to just let the car take over. You do not have to interact with anything. You don't have to keep your eyes on the road. You don't have to touch the wheel. You have full access to the center display. You can stream movies, play games.
You can. So all that the old prohibition about being able to look at movies or TV while you're driving, that's gone.
Correct.
With this.
With level 3, that is one of the allowances. Yes.
We talked about who takes responsibility, right?
Right.
Is that with level 3?
That's right. The level 3 is really a government, making sure that's Mercedes-Benz saying that they will take full responsibility to anything that happens to that vehicle when it's engaged. If the car tells you to take over, it's in a situation it can't control, then you're responsible. But when you have it locked in, level 3 is on, the lights are on, it takes Mercedes-Benz will take full responsibility for anything that happens. There's cameras all over the car. Obviously, it'll see if there's
Emergency
flashing lights approaching from the back. It'll ask you to take over. They sell it by a subscription, which 2 reasons for that is, one is if you ever move to another area and you don't need it, reason for paying for that up front if you don't
If
need
you
it.
move to
You
like
just cancel-
Montana where they haven't done any.
You just cancel the subscription. But also, every time you start the car, it downloads new maps into the system so that it has 100% latest up-to-date maps.
Is it available now?
Only on the EQS sedan. It'll arrive in the S-Class sedan very shortly, and be in a lot more Mercedes coming shortly.
Now, can it only be used legally in 2 states?
California and Nevada are the only 2 states that have approved it. There will be more coming. They're not going to commit to where, but they basically said Florida, as far as they're concerned with mapping, like Florida's ready to roll.
Oh, okay.
Certain
So it comes
sections,
down to mapping.
Yeah, well, it comes to the government.
Right.
Each state has to
to
allow
approve
it.
it.
And they've got some of the Northeast done and other parts of the South. So they're working on getting it out as much as it will be allowed.
So beyond this, when people talk about pure autonomous driving, that's level 4. And is this that close to that? Did you get any sense that level 4 is actually just around the corner?
Yeah.
That's a big controversy.
Yeah, and again, it's really a legal thing, not necessarily a technology thing. It's just all of this technology, and they've driven them in Europe at much higher speeds than what we're allowed to do. So it's definitely coming, but the fact that it's under 40, I like in that. If you think about the worst part of driving is sitting in traffic, right? Just let the car take over, and it's easy to feel comfortable doing that because you're at slow speeds. You have plenty of time to jump in there if you need to. But I never had one situation all day we were driving that I needed to. And as the day went on, you find yourself less and less paying attention to what's going on around. And we were just playing games or whatever we were doing in the car.
We've talked many times about the semi-autonomous systems, and we generally agree that the one that we like the best is the GM Super Cruise type. But that's totally different. That's a system where the maps are involved, are in the car. It basically is running off of maps already stored, which this system does too.
Right.
But that's mostly a highway, and it doesn't necessarily get you out of trouble, unexpected trouble.
Correct. And you have to stay engaged in the process.
Right.
You have to keep your eyes looking forward and touch the steering wheel when it asks you
But
to touch the steering wheel.
this is the Drive Pilot is you can pretty much, I won't say go to sleep, but you can
could.
certainly.
No, you can't.
Yeah.
You can't recline the seat. It locks
Okay,
that out.
interesting.
So and they don't.
You can't get too comfortable.
Correct. They obviously don't want you to put anything in front of you like a laptop between you and the airbag. But other than that, you can do whatever you want inside.
Okay. Any other comments from anybody about it?
I mean,
Are you-
I got to
would you-
ride in it
would you- and
about a
what-
year and
were
a
you
half ago, 2
comfortable?
years. Yeah. Oh, yeah. And the one that I was in was kind of, it was a little more technologically advanced than the ones. Well, maybe not technologically advanced. That's not. It had more tech in it for monitoring purposes because it was like a prototype. And so you got to see like how the LiDAR was working because it's like there's LiDAR, there's cameras, there's radar, there's like a sensor in the wheel that's like trying to figure out if the ground is wet, and if the ground is wet, then you can't use the system. But I was really confident, like just riding around in it. Now I was being driven around in it, and but I thought it was really cool. And what I like about this system is that it will be a very long time before we'll ever see a system like this on a city street, because those are incredibly unpredictable.
You mean actually downtown?
Correct.
Stoplight to stoplight.
Correct. But a system like this, and similar to Super Cruise, is made for the highway. This is for like, I could see this, if this could eventually get up to over 60 miles per hour, would make driving up and down I-95 so much easier. It would just I think it could just take the load off of some of these heavy
pretty easy.
drives.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, so I think it's definitely very cool.
I do think, though, focusing on stop and go traffic on morning commutes makes a lot of sense, because just think of if you can eliminate all those fender benders that end up causing such bottlenecks just because somebody takes their attention away from the wheel for 2 seconds. So interesting stuff. Well, thank you all. What a great podcast we've gotten through to, and it's time to wrap things up and to thank everybody. I want to thank Brian Robinson, Greg Carlos, and Jessica Ray, who's also our podcast producer. Thanks to all of you for listening for our podcast today. And if you're wondering, if you're new to our podcast and want to say, well, I'd like to watch MotorWeek, the television series, you can see it on your local public television station. What time? Well, just go to our website, motorweek.org or .com. Click on the tab Watch MotorWeek and enter your zip code for days and times we're broadcast in your area. Or hop over to our cable partner, mavtv.com, for their schedule. You can also stream MotorWeek episodes for free on your mobile device or streaming box by downloading the PBS app, available at your device's app store or streaming channel library. And all of the individual road tests and feature segments are also available at youtube.com/MotorWeek. In short, if you've got a screen, you can watch MotorWeek. Thanks to audio engineer Austin Harris, podcast creator Bob Mixter. To all of you out there, thanks for being a part of MotorWeek.
You have been listening to the podcast of MotorWeek, television's original automotive magazine. MotorWeek is made possible by Auto Value and Bumper to Bumper and TireRack.com. For additional information on podcasts, videos, and showtimes, visit our website at motorweek.org. And watch MotorWeek, television's longest-running automotive magazine series, each week on your local PBS station.